Directors to welcome you today to our 2023 Georgia Legislative Session Preview. We are streaming on Facebook too, so if you're on Facebook, thank you for watching. As we have become accustomed to, a few housekeeping items. We are recording today's session. The recording will be available on our website, georgiansforthearts.org, and on our YouTube channel. You're encouraged to share the video with your network to help build a statewide team of arts and culture champions. All mics are muted or will be muted to keep distractions to a minimum. If you have comments or questions, feel free to use the chat feature, which will be with me, and I will get to them as time permits. Finally, before we begin, please take a moment to commit yourself to keeping your camera on for the duration of our session, or proceed to go ahead and just turn that off, again, to keep distractions to a minimum. Okay. All right, so again, for the moment, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to Georgians for the Arts. Georgians for the Arts is a 501c3, established in 2019. We are an all-volunteer-led group. Our mission is to provide vision, leadership, and resources that ensure the growth, prosperity, and sustainability of arts and culture in Georgia. To do this work, we work towards providing year-round arts and culture advocacy activities, programs for artists, and the networking of Georgia's arts and culture champions, all working toward a better Georgia. This is demonstrated in part with today's session, our annual summit, and ongoing membership communications. Several members of our board of directors are here with us. Our board of directors are comprised of Julie Wilkerson, Waduda Muhammad, Abby Matei, Myrna Fuller, and Priscilla Smith. Georgians for the Arts is supported exclusively by Georgians and Georgia-based arts and culture organizations. Individual membership starts as low as $5 per month with a student membership available. Alternatively, arts and culture organizational memberships are also available for as low as $25 per month. So if you're not already a member, please visit our website to consider becoming one today and add your name to the roster of arts and culture champions to help make events like today happen. One other remark, we are always on the search for stories from you to share with the arts and culture community. We're starting to produce more, and we'll have an ongoing spotlight series, celebratory events, and we're always open to guest contributors. Content need not be written specifically for Georgians for the Arts and may be repurposed from your own organizations. In addition to ongoing financial support needed to help Georgians for the Arts operate, we also need ongoing support to connect with congressional and state elected officials. There are over 250 individuals representing Georgians. Each individual needs constant attention. Every individual needs that one-on-one relationship to make things happen. To that end, it must be confessed, it is beyond the scope of any grassroots or volunteer-run organization, such as Georgians for the Arts, to have quality or persuasive relationships with our 250 plus public policy makers. This is where you come in, perhaps. We're always in need of year-round help connecting with our representatives. If you or your organization can contribute to building a statewide network of arts and culture champions, we want to hear from you. We have 2 opportunities featured on our website and more to follow. So moving on to our main event. Today's session is focused on economics. If you know anything about the legislative process, it is likely you will agree the most compelling message to sway our policymakers is through money. More specifically, the impact legislation has on their budget and the impact it has on the economy. One of the most persuasive tools we have is economic impact research to help make a compelling case. Right now, we have just such a research project happening. Americans for the Arts is conducting their Arts and Economic Prosperity National Study of the economic impact of the not-for-profit arts and cultural industry. Right now, audiences in 395 participating communities in every state plus the District of Columbia are participating. Featured here are Georgia's research partners. Last study was published in 2015, and then this one here will be released in late 2023. Later today, we'll share with you where all the reports can be found. However, what you will not find currently is a study focused on the state of Georgia. However, for the first time, thanks to Tina Lilly and her team at Georgia Council for the Arts, we will have a statewide study this year. And it will be a huge asset for us to make a more compelling case of why arts and culture is important to invest. If you encounter any of the research efforts, please help. We desperately need quality data today, and it will be years before another effort is made to this scale. Why provide a focus on this research study? Well, this is, or this will be a core tool to use when communicating with your representatives. Today, this session will be split into two parts. Part one will include our speakers from a cross-section of organizations sharing legislation of interest to them. In our conversation, they'll also share how they respond to bills and their strategies to help educate legislative members about the pros and the cons of that legislation's impact. We'll take a very short break, and then part two will immediately follow, which will include a quick overview of the legislative process, a quick demo for a very valuable advocacy tool, Bill Track 50, and then finally a short tour of Georgians for the Arts' own Arts Action Center. So, without further ado, I have the pleasure of introducing our panel of speakers today, representing a full spectrum of experts helping to lead Georgia's arts and culture community. During our time together today, they'll share, again, their stories about the legislative process and legislation of interest to them. We have with us today, we have Marcy Breffle, president of Georgia Association of Museums. And I do want to make sure that I have her on. Yes, excellent. Let me just catch her quickly. And there we go. Eileen Edwards, Vice President, Dance Educators of Georgia. Laura McCarty, President, Georgia Humanities. Mala Sharma, President, Georgia Music Partners. Karen Suhaka from Legend Nation. And then last but not least, this is alphabetical order. Sorry, Allan. Allan Vella, President and CEO from the Fox Theater. So their achievements and expertise can be found in the program guide, which is on our homepage for georgiansforthearts.org. Okay. And here we go. All right. So plan here is I have a series of questions that will hopefully begin a conversation of how you as individuals and you and your organizations react to our representatives at the state level as well as the federal level. So I do want to start off with, we'll start off with Marcy. So same question for everyone. So Marcy, so what has been your experience thus far with trying to influence our elected officials through advocacy or lobbying or some other strategy?
Sure. Going first. Y'all, thank you so much for having me here today, Patrick. Happy to jump on and talk about the Georgia Association of Museums. So if you're not familiar with GAM, we are a statewide association that is here to serve a very diverse membership of museums across the state. So we are here to provide resources and keep Georgia's museum community strong, effective, and proactive. Y'all might have known us as GAMIG, Georgia Association of Museums and Galleries, but we, over the past couple of years, rebranded as GAM. First question about how have we influenced members of government. So GAM has been very proactive on the federal level, I would say more than on the state level. We send representatives Georgia community or museum professionals every year to Museum Advocacy Day, which is sponsored by the American Alliance of Museums. In past couple of years before COVID, we had representatives meeting with our Georgia reps on the Hill to talk to members about the importance of the National Endowment for the Arts, the importance of the Institute for Museum and Library Services, and why funding was so crucial to help our Georgia museums. Post-COVID, Museum Advocacy Day looked a little different. In 2021, our members took part in talking to reps about COVID economic relief, and again, reinforcing how critical funding from NEA and IMLS was to help support Georgia history museums, art museums, galleries, science museums, and also thinking about tax policy reform. So that, for the most part, has been where the bulk of our efforts are, but our organization is coming together. We have our 2023 conference in January in Cartersville, and that'll be a time for our group to come together and discuss how we can make a change on the state level. And then also, I know Museum Advocacy Day will be again in DC, February 27th and 28th, and I'm sure we'll be sending representatives to that as well.
Excellent, thank you so much. Eileen, you have the same question?
Well, hello, everyone. I have been involved personally with Georgians for the Arts and Americans for the Arts on state and national advocacy efforts and arts action summits. What I am trying to do as Vice President of Dance Educators of Georgia is to try to build a network of teachers and artists across the state who can help, because one of, I think, the most fundamental things that we need to approach is a local grassroots municipal, effort. Because, and we've had these conversations before, Patrick and I and others, that it can't just, the arts action summits are great and they're kind of like inspiring. It's like when you go to one of those retreats and get all, motivated, but then it's that daily work and making sure that you're making connections with your local legislators, your state officials, your school board members. I am a teacher, and so that's where a lot of my background is, as with Dance Educators of Georgia. But we also have members that run professional dance companies, that run collegiate programs, that have private studio businesses, that have their own production companies working, the movie and TV industry, needing choreographers and, all of those, the business that's, kind of been such a huge influx in Georgia recently. So I am kind of right now a one-person committee, but we're trying to we definitely have people in our organization that are interested in kind of getting an advocacy committee together so that we can have a network of, like I said, all of our our entire membership and link it with Georgians for the Arts, because there are people that are interested in pursuing this and providing some more efforts and advocacy so that we can, like I said, get a wider, more diverse approach as opposed to just our, state and, federal officials, that we can work, with our local communities, because that's, all the funding matters, but things that affect us directly. And I think especially for education, I know we're focusing on economics today, but education is also tied into economics in our country. So I think it's just important to try to, like I said, create a more localized effort. And that's what I'm trying to start with Dance Educators of Georgia, to things I feel like I've been doing on my own to try to get a group. And we do have an interest, we're just trying to get the information and, some assignments, and we're ready to roll. So.
Cool. Very good. Thank you very much. Laura from Georgia Humanities.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Laura McCarty, Georgia Humanities. We are a 501c3 that serves the entire state of Georgia, and our area is the humanities. We tend to say that the arts are a subject matter part of the humanities. We don't fund creation or performance of new works, but we are about discussion and culture and interpretation and analysis. And so very many of our programs that are supported, involve arts organizations. So I appreciate the chance to tag on to this. We're affiliated with the National Endowment for the Humanities, which is another federal cultural agency. And like my colleague at GAM, we participate in a national advocacy day where we go and educate our members from Georgia about the services and programs that we've provided in their communities and the impact of those on their voters. Very often before we can get to making a specific advocacy request, we have to build up that relationship and that knowledge, such that over time, it becomes more familiar, because as we all know, the federal budget is huge and there are millions of different important causes. And so we get this one shot to do that, but that doesn't mean we can do it all in one shot. We have to follow up with them when we make new grants. We have to have members of our board reach out to their members of Congress. Some of our grant recipients write letters to their members of Congress just to reiterate and invite them to programs. Those are all important things. In terms of state of Georgia, our competitive grants are supported through the state of Georgia, through the Department of Economic Development, like Georgia Council for the Arts. Our funding is pretty small right now. It's $62,500 for that statewide program. And so, when Patrick asked me about what legislation are we interested in, we're always interested in trying to get that back up, because it was more before the Great Recession and the pandemic. But we also understand that we have to make the case of what is the return on investment, and so we're more and more calculating those kinds of things in terms of the public-private partnerships that our grants support. Up until this session, we have retained a registered representative, lobbyist, whatever you want to call it. We've been represented by a person who does that as a former member of that body. Unfortunately, this year that person is not available to continue. And so right now we're beginning to figure out whether we're going to, handle it internally, or whether we're going to invest in another firm or another individual. And so, we're going to probably get to this. We got a lot of new leadership in the State General Assembly. And so as we go into this, the education and the relationship building part of it is very important. And so that makes this gathering together timely now. So thank you.
Excellent. And we also, of course, have some kindred spirit here, because back in October, it was the National Arts and Humanities Month. So we're connected. Moving on to Mala from Georgia Music Partners.
Thank you, Patrick. And thanks again for, inviting Georgia Music Partners to be a part of this, and for your continued support. The Georgians for the Arts has been very supportive of our efforts in the past. So we look forward to a continued partnership with you guys. As co-founder and president of Georgia Music Partners, we also, like Georgians for the Arts, are an all-volunteer organization. Advocacy and education are kind of the driving goals for GMP since our inception about 11 years ago. We've actively been advocating for legislation from exemption of the sales tax on tickets for nonprofits to labor issues around gig workers. We're primarily known for our real strong push for a music tax legislation, similar to what film and digital entertainment have. And last year we were able to push through 2 pieces of legislation that we've actively been working on for a number of years, and that's the Truth in Music Advertising and the True Origins of Good Act. But we work very closely with state legislators. Over the past few years, we've also gone to more of a grassroots approach as well, and have worked, close to and set up, sort of chapters all around the state in different communities and markets, because, in keeping with the theme of this webinar, one of our big, mottos is music is economic development. And yes, we're all in the arts, but as I learned in one of the past seminars that you hosted, Patrick, I think Georgia is the #1 state as far as the economic impact of the arts. So we're at the top of that one. However, I think we're at the bottom when it comes to funding. So I think events like this kind of help us all learn what we can do. We've had a lobbyist that we've had on our team for a number of years. And so we work closely with him. And one of the things that has proven to work for us, and we've been involved in a number of times, and we'll have to do it again, as Laura mentioned, with so many new members of the General Assembly coming on board, leadership changes. I think education is first and foremost the best way to move the needle for all of us. They're learning and establishing those relationships with them. I will let you know that through one of our music study committees that we've done this past session, and we're wrapping up, to kind of, we went around the state and met with local leaders, as well as the joint House and Senate bipartisan committee. There is some interest in perhaps an arts caucus. So I think that would help all of us if that does take hold. And as we get more information, I'll certainly share it with you, Patrick.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay, last but not least, we have Allan in from the Fox Theater.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks for having us on. We appreciate it. The Fox has been predominantly, busy advocating on the state level probably since 2016. My colleague Ariel Capilupo and myself have been really active working with our lobbyist, Five Ash Stanley, and it really kind of all began when the initial gaming legislation was introduced for Georgia. And we were taken back by the legislation because it insisted that the gaming organizations build entertainment venues. And in my segment of the arts industry, my colleagues around the country have been challenged by casino-owned and operated venues when they enter their market, only because casinos utilize entertainment and the arts as a loss leader to drive traffic to their casino floor. So I never really saw myself in the advocacy business, but became involved quickly out of fear and in that threat to our institution. So Ariel Capilupo and myself created the Georgia Arts and Culture Venues Coalition to help educate our legislators so they understand the importance of our sector and they understand our economic impact and the threat that they're creating to all of us as major institutions in an assortment of communities around the state. And frankly, I invite everybody to join us because I think the more we work together, the better. We've kind of had a fine line as it relates to our approach, and our stance has always been, we're not against gaming, but we are concerned about casino owned and operated entertainment venues and the damage it's going to do to the entertainment venues throughout the entire state. So that's largely been our work. And frankly, our strategy has been to educate. We're a 501c3. However, we're self-sustaining. And I also represent the Fox Theater Institute, which is led by Lee Burns. And one of the things that we do throughout the state, besides operating the Fox Theater in Atlanta, is we provide grants to other historic theaters around the state, usually about $500,000 per year. And we provide other kind of historic consultation, and we have other programs as well. And we try to inform the legislators that we try to assist facilities oftentimes in their district, and their facilities are great economic catalysts and generators for their area. And all of them will be threatened if there's any population of casino owned and operated venues later on. But luckily, we've been able to kind of help tap that down with other forces out there, but it's a threat that continues. And we anticipate there'll be more legislation introduced this session.
Mhm.
If anyone would like any more information, by all means, please reach out to myself or Ariel Capilupo.
Yep, awesome. Now to chime in with regards to that particular piece of legislation, one of my reps down here in the Southeast is actually one of the original sponsors. And years ago, with a sit down with him and the entire delegation in this area, I went to them and I said, hey, more money for Tina. Response was, yeah, sure, if we get this gaming legislation passed. Downside is the threat to live entertainment. The upside is a lot more money, perhaps, going towards and dedicated to education. But it has been removed any reference to arts education or anything that would be able to be earmarked for those things that we here today are interested in. I want to go circle back around, starting this time with Allan. So you had two things happening this year, and one of them was probably in partnership with the Woodruff. Starting with, I think it was House Bill, 586, which was maintaining or continuing the sales tax exemption on basically performing arts admission tickets and the like. Woodruff made a big push for that. I'm pretty sure you did too, as well as others throughout the state. What was your interpretation of that process so that you're now not paying sales tax on tickets?
We do pay sales tax on tickets, depends on the activity. So it is exclusive to fine arts. The concern by the legislators was that commercial entertainers, as they put it, or popular entertainers like a musical act, right? A rock band, et cetera, would not benefit from this. I think the major push was through the Woodruff, frankly, because of the fine arts, right? So it really helped the symphony, the opera, and others. And because drama is also a beneficiary of that tax exemption, in our case, there's some benefit to us. It's predominantly the benefit to the producer and not so much to the venue, based on because our entertainment is not produced from ground up, right? If you will, we're a roadhouse, so they benefit greatly. We benefit to a smaller degree, but the Woodruff was the driving force and the interest in keeping our fine arts institutions like the symphony healthy. So we were very much supportive of that, and we were grateful for all their efforts because they put quite a bit of effort into it, and we did our best to support. And probably like all of you, we often have conversations with our colleagues to find out who's interested in what activity and what legislation, and try to support one another without stepping on each other's toes, and just do what we can to help one another.
Mhm, mhm. And hopefully, once we get over to part 2, you will all be able to see how we are in a better position to help make that happen. So, so you do have that happening, but also to stay with you just for one more moment, with regards to the legislation surrounding the gambling. You've been able to kind of fend off part of that. Another part of it has been the fact that there's not been a lot of stomach for it at this time. However, there's always a however, it's also brand new revenue, new money,
Right.
and that's going to be extraordinarily attractive. So, how have you been able to, kind of push back?
Yeah, it's been challenging. And our concern also is that the gaming organizations have created a coalition, and they are working together now. I think at one time, the casinos had approximately 50 lobbyists employed, and we had our whopping 2. And so it was very much a David and Goliath, situation. I would say to you all, as it relates to brick and mortar casinos and the difficulty that presents for all of us, our needs and desires are aligned with the major sports teams in Georgia. They too do not wish to see large casino resorts being built, because they all have great investments in real estate, if it's the Battery or the Gulch or others. So I think the good news is our local sports teams are also colleagues of ours that want to work alongside us to some degree. So I fear this challenge is going to continue. In terms of the benefit of having casinos in one's market, a lot of studies have been done, and we're going to great lengths currently to seek out studies that have been done by the Federal Reserve, academia, et cetera, weighing the facts if casinos are truly a benefit or not a benefit to a community. And frankly, there's mostly a substitution effect when casinos enter a market. There's obviously some benefit when it's being built, because it employs construction workers, et cetera, right? But predominantly, there's a substitution effect where people may not be spending money with your organization or supporting your art form as they're spending it at the casino. But there's really no net benefit societal wise for casinos. And now that they're more or less ubiquitous throughout the states, throughout North America, frankly, there's not a lot of great benefit in terms of tourists. And so we'll continue to fight the fight, and we welcome all of you to join us, and we'll do our best to help all of us, in this fight, and perhaps we can keep it in check.
Great, thank you. So again, going in reverse order here. Now, Mala, I know that during the last session and up through even now, I think you had some stuff last month. You've been extraordinarily, what's the word? Assertive in getting things done or not done. I think one of the most recent ones was a continuation of the Georgia Heritage Music Center study. Yeah. So that was also a new piece of legislation to get that going. So last session, you had a lot of things going on. So, what is it that you would want to focus in on for today, and how you kind of responded to that?
Sure, thanks. So, we have been actively putting our agenda together for the 2023 session since the last session ended. It's that to me is almost the best time to really start getting things together, having the meetings when the lawmakers have a little less on their plates, going to visit them in their home districts, in their home offices, and doing so with their constituents who make their living in music or supporting the music industry. And, just kind of continuing to build that deeper sort of partnership with them so that it's not us coming and asking them to support this legislation. They understand some of where we're coming from ahead of those asks. But to your question, I think, we've got three main sort of agenda items that we want to really push for in the 23 session. And one is that Georgia Music Investment Act is expiring in January. Since it was passed and signed by Governor Deal, it has not been usable in any way, shape, or form, because the bill that walked in the Capitol is not the same one that walked out, right? And so some of the things that we had hoped for kind of got cut out of the legislation that was signed. And so it just wasn't anything that could work. And so we'll continue to push for that. I can go into more detail if anyone has questions. But the second thing that we are really, really hoping for is a statewide music office. And, we've looked at what other states are doing, and if they don't have a statewide music office per se, they at least have dedicated staff that that work within that and have the expertise to know where some red flags are, anything that they should promote, market, or educate, and work closely with the entire network around the state. And then the third thing is for more focused music grants at the state level that would go through Tina, hopefully, for music projects, specifically for the small independent projects. So those are the three things that we'll be pushing for this session.
Super awesome. And we'll get back to your strategy. I know you had some really effective ways of doing that too. Laura, what do you have that you can share with us?
I don't think that we've really gotten any legislation formed up yet. We're like Mala. We're looking at where the opportunities are. One specific thing that's on our mind a little bit is figuring out Georgia's presence in terms of the upcoming 250th anniversary of the Declaration of the Declaration of Independence of the United States. We see some opportunities to kind of broaden public history in our state in conjunction with that opportunity. There is a national commission. There are a number of states that have formed state commissions. The partners that I've been talking with, we're not sure whether an official state commission is the way to go or not. But that is one area besides the funding that we're interested in.
Mm-hmm. Always about money. Always about money. Eileen, how's dance educators responding to any legislation of interest?
Well, like I said, kind of gathering information right now to kind of start our inaugural approach. And we actually had a couple sessions. We hosted Dance Educators of Georgia hosted the National Dance Education Organization conference just this October. And I was really pleased. There were several sessions on advocacy, and one was held, Stephanie Millen from South Carolina, and she actually helped write the legislative handbook for the Arts Action Summit. So trying to kind of pick her brain because she's been through this before. But I think, again, I've spoken and advocated for issues related to education, but I think there's some of those that they all relate, they're all reflected in our society. I was with the Georgia Association of Educators, just trying to kind of find another organization to speak out for these issues with. And, the bills about what can be taught and not, students aren't allowed to express their identity to us, and all things, transgender discrimination, things like that, that we see cause other problems with the industry, the arts industry in our state, where, you know, producers will pull out of the state based on legislation that's passed or things that are proposed. And so, not that we don't want to fight for those issues just because of money. I'm not saying that, but they are connected to the financial impact and the arts industry in the state of Georgia right now. So I think, you know, just kind of clearing a nice pipeline where we can kind of be working on these issues at all levels is what I'm really trying to do. Like I said, with our network of dance teachers throughout the state, just start more grassroots efforts that can, you know, help us build on a more state and national level as well.
Super awesome. And Marcy, do you have anything to share?
Sure. I'll say, like Laura with Georgia Humanities, we're looking to see where the opportunities are at. There's been lots of conversations about what the 250th anniversary will bring and how we can interject Georgia museums into that conversation. Right now, we're really kind of looking to see how we can provide the tools and resources to individuals and smaller institutions for them to be able to reach their representatives in their districts. I'm really compelled by, there's an energy there, but not giving people the tools that they need to be able to be successful is so important. During, I think it was last year, I sat in on Zoom with a bunch of Georgia emerging museum professionals, and they were doing a happy hour and letter writing campaign, which it was a space for community, but also a space for change. And we want to see how we can be a part of that conversation.
Super awesome. And like I mentioned, alongside Allan's comments, again, I think Georgians for the Arts is going to be there to be a better assistance and a better partner, because we do have, thanks to, you know, companies such as Karen's with Build Track 50, we do have the tools now to make things a heck of a lot easier with either getting the word out in terms of, you know, we want this or we don't want this, as well as being able to contact all of your reps. Really easy. So that's going to be part 2. So you got to stick around for that. Okay, so I'm going to come back to Mala now, because I already know from experience, number one, between the Woodruff Center and music partners, we've done a couple of campaigns. Now, you've also been very effective in delivering a message, and not all are able to do that. Now, in your case, besides campaigns and letter writing and the lobbyist, you've also sat before the committees where all the magic happens.
That's right.
Can you talk about that experience?
Sure. You know, and I think a lot of this, in order to get legislation passed, it will have to go in front of various committees on both the House and the Senate. And, you know, having done that numerous times, you kind of get comfortable with, you know, with talking not only about the bill, but talking, it's sometimes it's the message and sometimes it's the messenger. So we will bring in different people to speak in front of the committees and almost curate those committees or the presenters at those committees. But the other way that we've been effective, and I'll go back to your question in a second, is really pushing for more opportunities, you know, for standing committees. So the House, you know, a few years ago, Speaker Ralston, who we'll miss greatly, did put a standing creative, the creative industries committee together at the House. And so that's a fantastic opportunity for any of these organizations here to just present to those committee on a regular basis, even if you've got nothing, just so they start to understand, you know, challenges or ways that they could help and advocate. But speaking in front of those committees, you know, it's when you've got an active bill and you're in front of a committee, it's kind of nerve wracking, but you have to go in prepared and just be ready for questions and support and questions, kind of pushing back. And I think it helps to watch previous committees. If folks that are watching today are ever, find themselves in that role, all the videos from past committees are available through the General Assembly. And it's all awesome to just kind of review. I think Allan's done a few as well. And I've seen, it helps to kind of know what you're going into before you do. And that's a big part of what we do.
Yeah, I totally agree with watching and learning from the past. Down here in Savannah, we had one of our city council meetings just last Thursday. The film office was putting forth an ordinance trying to put into place a greater ability to put out parklets within the area, which is still an idea that I really couldn't get my head wrapped around. But that was part of the problem, is it was pitched before city council without really knowing how to go about it. And so there were probably more questions than not. That being said, we learned from that, and there has been a push for a public art ordinance that a lot of folks that are supporting that are frustrated because it's been a very slow process. But now looking at what happens with an ordinance that has not been properly thought through, or a strategy to communicate established, well, much better chance, because we're learning from that. We're learning from that. I want to speed up just a little bit here. And I know that Molly, you're already working towards, still trying to figure out exactly what you're going to put, pen to paper with the ongoing session. And then Laura, you were talking about generally just more money. Between all of you, then let me just ask this question: do you have any firm idea of legislation which can take many forms? It can become law. It could be, restricting or earmarking by way of a resolution, something that's going to tweak an existing bill. Requests to commend somebody, requests to recognize, to create, in your case, a heritage study. Is there anything out there that you would all be thinking about requesting in the upcoming session? I'll just go ahead and ask that one generally, since not everybody is going to be pursuing that.
Well, certainly resolutions is an alternative. I agree with you bringing up just resolutions that are part of the education process, the commending, the recognizing, for example, this is the 250th anniversary of Macon as a city. It's bicentennial, and they're doing a lot of great work down there. So, that may be the kind of thing. Right now, just particularly while there are so many new leadership people coming in, I mean, really what I'm spending my time on is just getting to know, to have an initial conversation, and hopefully before January 9th, when they come back in session, if there's anything that we would like to get introduced, we figured out a pathway of how to do that. We did a few years ago bring people on our board who lived in the district of the House Appropriations Chair and the Senate Appropriations Chair. Unfortunately, Senator Hill died and went to heaven, and so Mr. Tillery, we have not gotten anybody on the district from him. And it's not totally clear with the new lieutenant governor whether he will still be the chair or somebody else will be the chair. And in the House, Mr. England from over in Barrow is stepping down. So there's going to be a new House chair, which I've heard, who I think it's going to be a gentleman from Dublin, I believe is going to be the new chair, but that may not be right. Those things are, it's like, this is the time of year where you have to read all the newspaper columns about politics and the blogs that come out from the various government affairs firms. They had the biennial in Athens. I didn't go, but that was a place where they were trained about being state legislators. And sometimes I've wondered whether that would be a good thing to do sometime. And then the Eggs and Issues breakfast. I have bought a table for the Eggs and Issues breakfast of the Georgia Chamber. So that'll be a chance to, hear some things on the 11th of January.
And as you mentioned, and tacking on to what I had mentioned very early in our time together today, it is having somebody in the district that can walk down the street, drive down the street to say, hey, look what we're doing. And without that, you're nothing more than, an email or a voice on the phone. Very ineffective. Anybody else plan on introducing anything with your representatives? Okay. Part two, we'll get into part of the process with that. On behalf of Georgians for the Arts, I'll go ahead and throw in here. 2 years ago, one of my local representatives, he was a successful, it was his first term, so he was kind of ambitious. Basically handed to him legislative language for which he tweaked and everything and submitted for House consideration. The legislation was, if passed, when you complete your Georgia state income tax form, you would have a checkbox to check and donate, give over to, contribute to, whether it be all or part of your state tax refund. There are 8 other boxes already on there, but nothing that I'm particularly interested in between the wildlife and between dogs and cats and between the spay and neutering of animals. I'm not interested in those. But ideally, it'll be reintroduced, this case through the Senate, because he lost his seat. Well, he stepped out of his seat as representative and was successful in being elected to the Senate. 2 years is the lifespan of legislation unless it passes or other action taken. In this case, nothing happened and it died in committee. It died in committee. It never got even a discussion because of competing interests within that committee. So it'll be reintroduced hopefully this upcoming session on the House side with one of the other sponsors. It'll be introduced on the Senate side. So if all things go well and they listen to us, when you complete your tax year 23 state return, you'll have a little checkbox. So we can give more money to Tina and Georgia Council for the Arts. Time always flies when you're having fun. I'm going to go back the other direction here, starting with Marcy again. So Marcy, a lot of folks here, either here today, right now, they're watching on Facebook, and they'll be watching the recording a bit later. So you have experience with a lot of this. What is it that you would want to communicate to those that don't have that same level of experience, trying to influence the policymakers, trying to influence legislation in one direction or another?
Cool. So probably don't give up. So easy to just feel like you're getting nowhere and feel like you're very small in the big cog of government, but stick with it, leverage those connections, with your representatives. Don't feel like you can, sometimes people think they can, I don't want to say cheat the process, but it takes time. We're building relationships here with these representatives, and that takes time, that takes effort, and you've got to be able to put the work in.
It does take effort and a lot of patience. You also have to kind of bite your lip or bite your tongue quite regularly.
Yeah, get like a squeeze ball or something so you don't blow up.
Maybe that's what we'll invest in. We'll invest a bunch of squeeze balls that we can carry around when we're talking to our reps. They'll ask the question, why does everybody have these balls for? Let me tell you why. Eileen, you've done this for a good number of years, talking with representatives state as well as in Congress. What would you want to share with those that have not kind of delved into this area?
I think one thing that I just remember clearly always when discussing advocacy that was taught to me when I was first starting and part of the Arts Action Summit in DC before I went to the Capitol is no numbers without a story, no story without numbers. And that you are speaking the language of the people who you are asking money for, which is money and, maybe like public persona, or whatever, but then you're also tugging at the heartstrings a little bit and having that balance always so that we don't just come across as like dreamers and, oh, please, no, this is here's these studies, the top skills for, that employers are looking for are creativity, collaboration. And, again, this is the teacher in me talking, but, how that you can advocate for things and build relationships. David Scott's my congressman, and I called his office and spoke with, like, come see a performance at our school, and just ways that you can reach out so that, because they do have a never ending list of people asking them for things and asking them for favors, and whether it be legislation or financial, appropriation or whatever, it's, you want to kind of stand out among that list of people asking and, showing that we are artists and so advocates for art. We should have an edge in that area with how we present and, speak and communicate with people because we're artists. So dig into that.
Excellent. And in addition to what you were talking about, I don't think you were part of one of the sessions or the meetings with a House representative, in this case, Buddy Carter, who's down here in the Savannah area. You'll find on our website under the advocacy and education section a couple of video recordings. One's in DC talking with the representative, as well as one from last year or 2 years ago when we were all virtual. And so two really good examples of instances where it was not persuasive. But every year it's the same thing. I get to give him the same speech, and every year it's falls on deaf ears, but that's fine. Laura, what would you have to share with anybody new to helping to try to influence policy?
I think a lot of what's been said is what I would say. The only thing I would add is use your tools. Like if you find out you have a meeting with some staff member, look them up on LinkedIn. Try to find out where they went to school. Mr. Carter used to have a very crack legislative assistant in Washington that had gone to Wofford, and I went to Wofford. I'm a lot older than him, but we could get that terrier love thing going, and that that would help us break the ice. And you never know which person you're meeting with, whether it's a staffer or a member, is going to be just the relationship you need when the time is right for you to need that. So I always say, listen to what they say, be persistent, but be respectful of their time and the fact that they have many, many demands coming at them from all kinds of directions, and enjoy it. It's about being nice to people. So.
And making that connection, again, another tool that we are able to provide is the ways and the means. And Myrna online was asking about that question too. How do we know who to contact? Well, part of it is, find out your representatives, always keep them informed. But also with every piece of legislation, we have the sponsors and we have those that voted for, voted against, or just didn't vote. As well as they all have their own, bios and websites and everything else. So we take a look at what their committees are, the subcommittees are, their interest, specifically their family, because whatever you can do to make that connection is what's going to resonate with them. Mala, you're pretty experienced, so lend some of your wisdom to those that are new to this.
Well, I just want to jump onto what you said, using their family and doing that research and finding out it borders on cyber stalking, but you learn a lot about it's doing your homework. And I don't think it hurt us that Governor Deal's daughter Katie was a singer, and so we had her on our advisory board, and what better way to kind of what better advocate could we have there, as someone who wants to make a living in this, and that's what we're trying to do, is bring more opportunities for musicians in the state. So but yeah, I think that having, just echoing what everyone said, it's all important, and knowing, I think Laura said this, but also listening to what they say. Some will tell you flat out why they have a problem with it, and rather than getting upset, to me, that's better. You're hearing, they're telling you their perception and what they have issues with. It's up to you to find a respectful way to counter that, and maybe move, have them flip, what their thinking is on it. And again, it like Eileen said, it takes time. Yeah. And I think that this session, with so many new members, it's not an election year. It will be a slower session to get started, so it'll probably run longer. For those who don't know, Georgia's legislative session runs 40 non-consecutive days, and so they'll probably drag it out, and so that gives us a lot more time. Those days that they just have committee meetings and aren't actually in session are great days to go down and visit. And start, really start developing those relationships. And you'll be surprised, on both sides of the aisles, you'll have people that are for what you're trying to do and against. And just remember that these legislators live all around the state, and this is just something they do a couple of months out of the year. So get to know them as people and develop those, partnerships.
And to respond to your point of trying to figure out, or having them communicate why they do what they do, one other strategy that I think several of us have taken is go in there, and if you are looking for more money, go in there asking for more money, but also have something that's not going to cost money. So, with DC, for example, National Arts Advocacy Day, we want more money for the NEA. Oh, and by the way, we want you to be able to make it easier for artists to get their visas. It's not monetary policy. Last but not least, Allan, what words of wisdom would you have for anybody new to this?
Well, I would say, like in our case, fortunately, we have a venue, right? So we hosted several caucus events. We tried to get both parties in and through the building, which helped. And I don't know if it was, I think it might have been, who it was, Mala, talking about the cyber stalking. I found when you do events and you invite their spouses, the spouses have a tremendous influence on these folks. And I literally saw one of the spouses say to her husband, a senator, "You got to protect this place. You need to take care of it." And I don't think there's anything more powerful than that, right? But to everyone's point, I think you got to build that relationship. There's some give and take. I think understanding what their concerns are, and trying to respond to it. But if it's your art form, let them see it. If you're, let them come into your facility or see one of your functions and understand the people behind it and they matter, and all the people that you employ, they matter, and they all vote. And I think just getting to know them and meeting them on their terms, and as someone mentioned previously, they're not full-time legislators. They come from varying backgrounds, from someone who's a pipe fitter to someone who's a lawyer or a doctor or pharmacist or whatever, and they're often a lot like us. So that really helps, and I think just getting to know them on a human level is beneficial.
Yeah, my senator up until this year was a dentist, or he was my dentist. So, either I go to Allan and talk to him about policy, or I get it during the root canal. Pick one. So we're beyond time that I have planned for just a little bit, but I will go ahead and say, thank you for all of you to be here with us today. And before we kind of move on to part two, so let me just say, for video recordings and stuff, this does conclude part one of our 2023 Georgia legislative session preview. So we hope that you all found it insightful, and you can use the information as you move into 23 when the next session begins on January 9. We're going to take just a short 2-minute break so I can get things kind of reset, and then we'll head right into part two, covering some of the items in our legislative toolkit, beginning with Karen and Bill Track 50. Thank you all for joining us today. Consider joining Georgians for the Arts to help build a statewide network of arts and culture champions. Gratitude. And if I don't see you in part two, have a great day.